Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of The Attacking Two. I'm your host Jimmy Funnell and I'm as always joined by my fellow co-host Andy Martin, and today by an absolutely brilliant guest, one that we have in this form never had on our show and are absolutely honoured and privileged to have on. Sebastian Kneißl. He was a former Chelsea player, absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for coming on. We're so ecstatic to have you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Today we've got a very tight agenda, but a brilliant one. We will be talking through Sebastian's Chelsea career, how it was at the club, of course, some of the most iconic figures that he met there, how it was to play with them, and generally his career as a professional footballing player. As always, let's get straight into this. There is only one question. We're going to start straight off. Sorry. Sebastian, as said, welcome to the podcast. It's absolute pleasure to have you on. We want to start straight off with the question that will be all on our minds. How was it? How was it at Chelsea? How did you get there? What was your experience?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for being a part of it. Well, what do you expect? What kind of answer do you expect? Of course, it was a blast. It was amazing. As a 17-year-old, going to London by myself, away from home, playing all of a sudden in a big club with big personalities. Amazing. The first few weeks, actually, I was so quiet. I didn't want to speak English. I was so ashamed of my school English, and I just listened. I was walking around the training ground with obviously the big names, the first team. I was in the under 19s back then. Started off in the under 19s, trained with the first team, and all the way through. It was a great time.
So you were regularly training with the first team then? That was normal?
Yeah, obviously I was. It wasn't normal that a foreign player comes to the club, and so we had to be really cautious of how the other youth team players will accept that. So we spoke about it before, and I had my pro contract, and it was all set up, and we had the plan laid out for the next 2 or 3 years. The contract was running for 5 years. So it gave me and the club a lot of time to obviously develop and see how we get on. Mm-hmm. And in the first year, we decided that I'm training, depending on training days and importance of training, with the under 19s, with the reserves, or with the first team. Always playing in the under 19s in the first season, I think. Yeah.
But how did that come about? I mean, back in the days, it wouldn't have been the normal scenario for a 17-year-old lad from Germany going to Chelsea. So What was kind of the bond you developed that you said, all right, I'm taking on that challenge and want to move to England so early in your career?
Obviously, it came through some scouting. I was playing in the Germany under 15s, under 16s age group. Yeah, and we had the international games, and obviously there are loads of scouts from all different clubs. And back then, obviously, I was a goal scorer, and did quite well. And I remember the actual game that I was scouted by Chelsea, and we lost 4-0 to Turkey, and I should have scored about 5 goals in that game. Well, you obviously think, okay, well, he should have scored 5. Why did we sign him? And I actually asked that question as well. And they said, well, you got into the positions, you had the ability to get in front of the goal. Obviously, 2 times the keeper saved it, 2 times you hit the post, 1 you've missed. So we don't care about the actual finish itself, but at that level, in that age group, you've done quite well throughout the game, and obviously it was a big decision to make back then. You didn't have what we are doing now, Skype and smartphones and WhatsApp, and it was still telephone, calling my parents, and yeah, it was quite a tough decision to make. I had quite some other offers as well, and to be honest, it was from Germany, Spain, Italy, and Holland, and obviously England. And I just went pragmatic way. I just thought, okay, I don't like the German team, Bayern Munich, so I wasn't a supporter of Bayern Munich, so obviously I declined that one. And then I just went through it. I said, I don't speak Spanish, I don't speak Italian, I don't speak Dutch. Well, in school I should have learned English, so yes. I knew some English, and I felt obviously Premier League, massive atmosphere, massive name, and yeah, I want to be part of it. And that's how it came about. I was in London for about a week, just before Christmas '99, to get the club, or to get to know the club and train with them and see if I like it or not. And then obviously my decision fell in that week.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah,
it's big. That really is big. I'm just got to say, I'm sure you echo the sentiment of many Chelsea fans watching this, saying Bayern Munich, nah, especially at the moment with them scouting Hudson-Odoi. So that is brilliant.
Yeah. Of course, yeah. There were some other obviously big clubs. I told them in other interviews as well. So in the running was Ajax, Lazio Rome, Barca, Bayern Munich, and Chelsea. Yeah. So yeah, it was back. If I look back at it now, I should have gone and at least had a look at some other clubs. Yeah. But to be fair, I just went to London. I can remember Frank Steer. He's part of the staff, and he picked me up, and I just felt like at home. It was my first day there. So how can you feel at home when you're first day there? And it was just brilliant. Obviously, the old training ground, Harlington, knowing all of this, seeing the staff, and obviously before the Roman Abramovich time, it was still a bit different.
Yeah. That is also something which I'd really like to get into straight there. So when Roman Abramovich did come, what were the main points that changed? I know that Robert Hoot came in like a year later, if I'm not mistaken, after Roman came in. Did you get to know him? Did he help you as well, or did you help him acclimatize? How was that?
Well, unfortunately, I have to correct you a little bit. Robert Huth came with me. We both
did he?
arrived 2000. Right. He arrived 6 weeks after me, because he was still 15 at that time, and he was only allowed. He was, I think, 15th of August his birthday is, and when he was 16, he was allowed to come over to England and play for the club, and obviously going to school as well. So that was good for me at the time. I could still speak to someone in my language, and we can basically go on that journey together. And when Roman came in, I remember the first day when he arrived at the club. We were at Harlington, and all of a sudden 6 massive cars, black cars, drove down the road, and you knew, okay, someone very important is coming now. And they just drove in, and loads of bodyguards and staff behind him, and we all had to line up. Yeah, so all of the big players, Marcel, Desailly, and Deschamps, and whoever was there, we all had to line up. And you're not used to that, because you're the big footballer. You can come wherever you want, and all the other people line up. So you have to line up. Strange feeling. And all of a sudden, Roman comes along, and he was just so nice. To be honest, he was just the normal. We all expected a very strict person, or with authority and stuff. I'm going to tell you how to play football. No, he was just enjoying himself. And he got on the pitch and actually took some penalties on that day, which was a laugh for everyone. Yeah, he enjoyed himself. We enjoyed it. But you knew straight away when Roman came in, obviously the expectations change and titles have to come. Silverware has to come. So it was good to go through all of this, but obviously for young players it was difficult because we had to do a step back.
So was it also a change in atmosphere? So if you have a comparison, what was the atmosphere like before Roman came along? So in your first few years to Chelsea, and then when he came along, what was the fundamental change other than changes in personnel, big players coming in and all that, managers changing? So what was the atmosphere like at the training ground?
Well, you have two categories, and I think the first couple of years that I was at the club, it was sort of like development orientated to see, okay, what can we do? How can we get the best out of the players? Can we integrate young players as well? Obviously, it wasn't that massive expectation of winning silverware. Yeah. And all of a sudden, Roman came in and it changed from development to results. And that is totally different for players as well. Obviously, for managers, Claudio Ranieri was back then the manager, and he basically took me up and said, okay, he took me to pre-season and the training camps in Italy, and that's where I played my first friendly game for the first team against Lazio. Strangely enough, Lazio. And I remember Ken Bates afterwards coming to me and saying, "Hey, brilliant first game. You've done well. Looking forward to having you in the Premier League this season." And I was getting all excited. And then Roman comes in and has obviously his expectations. And then Claudio Ranieri came to three young players, I think it was, and said, "Listen, I'm really sorry. We signed, I think, 8 new players. Damien Duff back then was in my position, club record 17 million, I think, roughly it was. Yeah. And he said, there's nothing I can do about it. I have to win trophies now, and I can't develop young players anymore. Not in that amount of young players." Which was obviously a blow for me, but I could totally understand it. And that's basically where it changed. All of a sudden, you have to win. There's all about winning. You can't take a day to reflect on what happened. How can we progress in a, how can I say, in a sensible way? Now it all has to be done with speed. Win, speed, development, speed, results, speed, and it's business.
So,
yeah, interesting. Yeah.
But picking on the point of Ranieri here, I was really interested, especially in that one question. I don't know really why, because I think it's about the time where I fell in love with Chelsea and watching them on TV here in Austria. And Ranieri was always a lovely bloke, and I think my perception of him as an outsider was always, well, he's that warm-hearted Italian guy. What was he like as a person?
I'm going back to one manager before, Gianluca Vialli. He was the one who signed me, and I actually got his shirt down in the corridor and my whole way, because he said, "Well, you remind me of me. The way you play." And I just stood there, and of course I understood it, and I was like, did I really understand that right? Am I reminding him of him? And it was a massive compliment, massive honor. And then unfortunately he left, I think 8 weeks after I was there. And then Claudio came in, and Claudio was brilliant. He was not so much speaking to the young players in terms of development. Obviously the coaching staff did that. He was really demanding, very Italian orientated, of course, with the training tactics, a lot of running without the ball. But for some reason, you felt good Yeah, you were there. You enjoyed it. You knew, okay, he was experienced. Yeah, he has a good mentality for the team, and I think that was quite difficult for him as well when Roman came in, because he had to change his work as well straight away, and unfortunately, it didn't work out as I would have wished him, because he deserves a lot more title and a lot more trophies the way he works with players.
One question which has been burning on my mind ever since I found out that we have the privilege of interviewing you or having you on our pod, is something that's also very contemporary at the time. It's been a question that's constantly posed by Chelsea fans and even among the punditry for years. As you mentioned, with Roman Abramovich coming in, something just changed, and also very much for the youth, and that's been I don't want to say detrimental to the future of many of our youth players, but it kind of has. So what I would like to know was, how did the club contribute to you developing as a player after the Abramovich takeover? So was whoever the manager was, how did they watch the youth? Did they watch you? Did they give you feedback? Did they make a point to know the names of those involved when you were in first team training, when you were invited to train with the first team?
Well, it was basically the first club who had that situation with Abramovich coming in, and it was, I think, a learning curve for the club as well. So they didn't really know, they didn't have the structure to work in that way. So I'm not actually saying, Chelsea didn't work with young players anymore, because they still didn't know, okay, how can we cope with that pressure, with that money, with that different image now as well. It's a completely new image that you got all of a sudden. You have to fight with negativity all the time. Oh yeah, Chelsea got loads of money, blah 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 blah. JT was the one obviously coming through, trained with him, played with him in the games, and he was actually the one who showed me how British football or English football is played. My second training session, I nutmegged one of the players. To be fair, by mistake. I didn't want to take the mickey out of him. Yeah, it was by mistake. And he just looked around to JT and said, JT, do him. And I knew, okay, I'm not sure what's coming now, but I think it will hurt. And not even 30 seconds later, I was about a meter, 150 in the air, and he took me out on a tackle. It was brilliant. I was actually laughing because it was, okay, welcome to Chelsea now. Yeah, and obviously JT made his way through. A couple of other players, Carlton Cole, I was playing with in the youth team. That was brilliant. Robert Huth after a couple of seasons, but not in the way that we had the talent in the youth team and in the reserve. There were so many good players that went on to other clubs and had some good careers, but it would have been different, obviously, if we had the chance to play in the Premier League a couple of games as well. Yeah. So with the years, Chelsea's done a great work. Yeah. So at the new training ground with players, they can look at their performances in training straight after training. Like 30 minutes later, they get their own scores. Yeah. So how the gaffer actually rate their training sessions. So which is good. Yeah, you always measure yourself on the scores and see, do I develop.
So just as a further question to this, because there were comments made by Jody Morris. I'm sure you know him at the club as well. I think it was last autumn where he said that it's been more or less a chronic disease at Chelsea, that managers, they don't even come to watch the youth team. They sit in their office, they get a report. Do they look at it? One doesn't know. That was something that he severely criticised. What are your sentiments on that?
I can agree. I do agree with that. Obviously, Ranieri hasn't been at the games to watch them. Jose obviously wasn't there to watch them. But they still knew. Now I don't know. Was it reports? Did they watch the game on TV? Yeah, on Chelsea TV or whatever. I don't know. But obviously, it's always nice to have the gaffer there or someone from the staff to watch your games. JT was there, so a couple of the players always came along. It was an older shot that we played, so it was always good. But obviously, you love it when the gaffer's there and someone from the coaching staff. Jody did great work at the club, and there's so much talent still in the club, and it's impossible to put all of these good players year by year in the first team. So that's of course something you follow as a club. Okay, do good work in the youth team and then sell them on.
Yeah, it is funny for me that you say it was already back in these days John Terry who had basically the reins in the dressing room and all that. He was, what was he, 22, 23 years of age, and already had the captaincy, obviously. But other than JT, when you first came into the club, or maybe some of the years on, who were, let's say, the big dogs in the dressing room? I mean, there were players like Desai, later Hasselbank, Sola. Who were the main guys, and who were the players? Yeah, especially Sola, and who were the guys you were looking up to?
There's so many players that I have to name now. Obviously, Wisey was back in 2000, still there, and he was running the show. He was the main man when it came down to that switch between having a laugh and now being focused on training, on work. He was brilliant. Didier Deschamps was quite interesting to watch as well, because he was very, very much into coaching already. Speaking to the players, speaking to young players. And I remember my first day when I walked into the training ground at Harlington, and whoever was there knows it was how can I say, a normal training ground. Some holes in the walls and in the windows. And I stood there in the middle of the training ground and I didn't know where to go. And all of a sudden, someone jumped on my back. And you remember when he does with a fist and rubs on his head and it hurts.
Nudgy, yeah.
And I just turned around and I wanted to punch him. I didn't know who it was, and I thought, "Who's doing that? It's my first day. How can you do that?" And I looked around. It was Didier Deschamps. I was like, "Oh yeah, good morning." Yes, I'm the new guy. Yeah, and he was laughing, and he showed me around the training ground. So he was very aware of who was there. Then, even though I had a pro contract, it was, and I felt as a big player, as in terms of my age group, I still knew, okay, there's big personalities there I have to look up to and learn from them. And in the under 19s, you get two players, back then you got two players from the first team where you had to clean their boots, right? And for me, it was Albert Ferrer back then and Marcel Desailly. So massive impact, of course, on my time at Chelsea. His shirt is down the hallway as well, because after every training session, you get to speak to them. Well, you have to anyway. You have to say, "Give me your boots." Yeah, after clean them, and then you can ask. And that's what I love about England when the youth team is training with the first team and you get in touch with them and they ask, okay, how did the game go? A Monday night or on the weekend, and you get to ask questions. So Marcel Desailly definitely, Wisey was at before. JT was then taking over from Wisey. Zola was, in terms of work ethic, he was unbelievable. He was always in the gym. I've never seen a player with that low body fat. Yeah, he was just always working, and it was an absolute pleasure. But there's Lams. He was. I'm never starstruck, never. But with Lams, I got shaky knees. Yeah, it was just, that guy was just pure, how can I say, professional, and it was a lovely person. You could always ask him questions. Yeah, brilliant. But then I can say Hernan Crespo. Obviously, I learned from him a lot, as he was a striker. And Hernan Crespo, I said Juan Sebastian Veron. Yes, there's so many more I can name, because when you're a young player, you obviously have one or two that you look up to. But if you can always ask different questions to other players, different positions, that's what's important. And I asked a centre back, Marcel Desailly, what can I do better? Yeah, and he gives you obviously some advice, because he wants you to progress as well. And one big name, I'd say a really big name for me in terms of importance, was Carlo Cudicini. Carlo is, I'm still in touch with him. He was unbelievable. He always looked out for me. He was always there when you have a question. He was always there to give you guidance as well. And he was just a nice person. And I'm so happy that he's made the way that he's doing now. Brilliant guy. Love him.
I mean, I feel starstruck, really. I do, because hearing all these names, I mean, that is phenomenal. I mean, one player that said your knees started to tremble a bit was Lampard, and I mean, among Chelsea fans, Lampard will always be one of the biggest players ever played for this club. When Lampard came, I mean, there was a bit of controversy because West Ham and the way he came, and of course Terry coming to be captain. What changed with these specific players? So Lampard, Terry, I mean, which would go on to build the spine of Chelsea for a decade.
Yeah. These two players, they clicked straight away. I wouldn't say players, personalities. They clicked straight away. And all of a sudden, it was not just JT there, and all of a sudden, Lams came in. And it's important to have an English spine within the team. Yeah, so that's what I always say. It's in Germany, it has to be a German spine where a couple of players transfer the values of the club, the nationality as well. So it's important to have that in the team. And JT and Lams did that. Jody Morris was still there. Yeah, always in their group. Ida Gudjonsson was there as well. There, yeah, and Ida is basically English anyway. So I don't. The way he thinks, and that group, especially JT and Lams, they just were so dedicated to their job. Especially Lams, who worked his way the ability that he had at the end, it was down to hard work. JT was always good, and he obviously did a lot of extra work, but Lams was different class, and the way they communicated on the pitch, brilliant. So they set an example, and that's what good leaders do. They just do the work unbelievably good, so others can look up to them. And they don't tell you what to do; they do it, and you just orientate yourself.
Well, it's actually a good point here, because many people think, or at least when you talk about Chelsea, it's all money, money, money. And when Roman came in, that obviously changed a lot, and no one will dispute that, because there was a lot of money being not only generated by Roman and given to the club, but also invested in, well, in one way or another, not really stupidly, because, all right, we had players that came in and did not have the success like Veron or something, but we also had the Drogbas, where you did not expect him to be the great player he has become. But I think what people forget when they say that the foundation for Chelsea's success has already been laid before, with Terry coming through and with Lampard coming to the club before Roman came to the club. So what would you say when 1 year later, after Lampard came, all these big name players, I think Makelele, Mutu, Crespo were the first ones who were really top notch, came to the club. What was it like as a youth player seeing all these people wandering about at Harrington all of a sudden, and must have been also a change for you from your perspective of the club and within the group, what changed in the personal dynamics between the players?
Yeah. First of all, you have to always think about when you come to a new club, even for big names, it's important that you know straight away, okay, which way are we going? Yeah, get some sort of orientation. And that's good when you have players like JT, who obviously come through the youth ranks and knows Harlington back then. You have Jody Morris still there. I've named it. Carlo was still there. And you have a group of 4, 5, 6 players where you can always ask. Even for Makelele, for Mutu, yeah, for already good pros coming in. And they put you into the right direction. Well, with Mutu went off somewhere sometimes, had his own direction, but he was a brilliant guy as well. In a way, it was good for me to have him around, but it wasn't. It's really difficult. It's hard to say when I say it was nothing special, because I just come in and the first team, the reserves and the under-19s, they sit in the canteen and you just fill up the table. You don't. The first team doesn't sit back there. The reserves here and the youth team there. You just sit in the morning when you go and have breakfast. You sit next to JT or next to Didier, and either you listen to what they say, what they speak about, you learn, from that, or you can ask questions. They ask you questions, or sometimes you just be there, and that's what I absolutely loved, and that has changed in the modern game. But for young players to come through, you need to be in touch with the first team. Yeah, and it helped a lot, yes, but it wasn't that special because you see them every day and you train with them, and they're just actually still they're normal human beings, and you sometimes laugh and smile what they actually think about. Yeah?
You mentioned the word twice now. Special. Coming to the special one. What was he like? What was he like as a person? Because he's such a wind-up merchant, and I loved him at his first stint, second stint. Obviously, he's a character who can wind up Chelsea fans as well. I've been at the Manchester United game earlier this season when he did that one or whatever he did, winding up all the Chelsea fans. But yeah, ultimately, I'm kind of curious what is Mourinho like? He's a serial winner. So what does he do differently, and how is he from a personal standpoint when you interact with him under circumstances where you sit in the room only one-on-one? Don't know if you got into these scenarios where you got to speak with him one-on-one as a youth player, but what was he like?
I was on loan in season 2003, 2004, I think it was, in Scotland playing for Dundee FC. And I actually enjoyed my time. I knew I wasn't going to get in the first team. There's too many good players ahead of me, and I just want to play in the first team somewhere. So I went to Scotland, enjoyed myself, actually wanted to stay there because the coach back then, or the gaffer back then, was my former youth team coach, Jim Duffy. Yeah. So I enjoyed it. I wanted to stay there, but then Jose signed obviously for the club, and he said, I want all young internationals back at the club. I want to see them. Brilliant for me, because I get to work with Jose Mourinho. I knew still that I'm not going to make it, but I'm going to enjoy my time there in pre-season. And I remember the training sessions, and he influenced my work nowadays massively, because it's about his presence, about his aura, about his the way he just comes across. And there's basically, with all the the viewers as well, how is it possible to have around 30 to 40 players on 2 pitches training at the same time, and you don't speak to every player, but every player walks off the pitch after every training session every day feeling he's the best player in the world on his position? How does that work?
Well, I just got goosebumps. I'm sorry, I just have to say that was a goosebump moment. Wow.
Well, yeah, goosebump moments for me every day.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden I just realized I'm not thinking about my performance on the pitch anymore. Whenever between 2 sessions, we went to the hotel, and JT and Lambs, they were obviously resting and having a quick nap, and I just wrote everything down. The training session itself, and what made that person so special one. What was the what did he do? Why am I feeling strange, different to Ranieri, to the coaches that I've had before? What does he do? He didn't speak to me, but I'm still feeling good. And that's how I got to work with body language, the way that he organizes everything. It was, if you compare it to training sessions now, it wasn't rocket science. It's still a ball and 2 goals, and all he did was, before you get to run 2 laps around the pitch, you get to stretch first. So that's not obviously a lot of stuff. Comparing to Ranieri, it was everything with the ball, every exercise with the ball, but it wasn't rocket science. But it was him, the way he was just there. I spoke to him a couple of times, and obviously I had questions on how I can do better. And he was just, I wouldn't say father figure. That would be going too far, but you just felt good around him. For some reason, you just felt good, and you just listen. You're just quiet and listen. Take everything like a sponge, and okay, I'll do that, Gaffer. I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll do that. He can tell you anything really, and you just do it. So he was brilliant, and that made him really special. And I think that's what a lot of Chelsea supporters still love about him. And deep down, every Chelsea supporter loves him. Of course, yes, over the years, he did change a little bit. And with some comments that he made, with some gestures that he made, I don't agree with. And I can understand why some fans are obviously upset with that. But still, in the history of Chelsea, he was one of the best managers, the greatest managers, because the way he actually handled so many players on a high level was brilliant.
I think the wounds will be able to heal now that he has left Manchester United.
Well, that's part of the business, and of course I can understand supporters on their way of thinking, but as a player, you have the same idea. Of course, it's always down to, do I have a job? Do I have a good job? Can I progress in my career? And as a supporter, you have a lot of emotions for one club. Unfortunately, you don't really have that as a player and as a manager. Very rarely, and you just want to fulfill your own dreams, which is totally understandable. And if you get another job offer, which gives you a better direction towards your goals, of course you're going to do it. But and some criticism, it was down to his comments, or it was his fault as well. Yes.
Before I pose you my last question, just as a quick follow up to what you just said, are you a Chelsea fan still today? Or are you would you describe yourself as a Chelsea fan? 5 years.
I wouldn't say I'm a diehard Chelsea supporter, because I've actually never really supported the club, to be fair. I just love the game, and when there's a good football game on, then I just enjoy it. I'm now in the commentary as a pundit in Germany, working for the Zone, doing the Premier League, and I just love watching football when there's a good game on. Of course, you're still in touch with someone at the club, and when the team is successful, I'm quite happy for the backroom staff, because they get rewarded as well, and the backroom staff is so important, and I love them to bits. There's so many good people there. Obviously, a lot has changed as well. Some other clubs, but still, I just when the club is, or when the team is successful, it automatically means the backroom staff is successful, and that's for me a very big, it's a massive feeling for me, positive feeling.
Well, Carlo Cudicini is currently part of the backroom staff, so
yeah, of course. But still at the club, in the back office, anyway, the club secretary and stuff. There's so many lovely people, and still driving the players to one place to another, getting all the stuff in, and there's so many people there. It's unbelievable, and they just love working for the club. Brilliant. You need those people.
Okay, so as said, last question from me. This is one which I've been really looking forward to pose, actually. You are a member of the founding group that started the Chelsea Loan Army that is infamous nowadays. So this Chelsea Loan Army, Chelsea fans love the term, and you were basically one of the first to do that. So how did those experiences as a loanee help you develop as a player? Were you encouraged by the club? I mean, I know it was still at the start of this whole system. So was it a bit of a hard start to it? Did you get enough feedback? How was the club in touch with you?
Actually, again, I'll come to that point where the club wasn't ready or well structured for that kind of work, and being loaned out, it was down to me basically to perform. I wasn't that often in touch with the club, but I knew that the current coach was obviously in touch with the club, and it's not always you don't always have to report every week. That's not what I think. If you want to develop, then it takes a little bit more time. With Dundee, obviously it was Jim Duffy who reported back to the club, and had a couple of phone calls with back then it was Gwyn Williams, who was for us in charge. And when I was at Westerlo, that was the partner club. To be honest, I don't actually know if it's still the partner club in Belgium. Back then it was, and there were four of us were there from Chelsea being loaned out, and obviously there you have you're always in touch. But again, the backroom staff talks to each other, the coaching staff talks to each other. So with the players, there was not much feedback back then. I'm quite sure that nowadays that's much different, because you have so many people working for the club. They're just in touch with the loanees.
So good that you said nowadays, because this is going to be the last part of the podcast now, that we talk about the current situation at Chelsea Football Club. And as you are well aware, because you are a pundit on German television, but rather OTT service, whatever the zone is. What do you think is the likelihood of Chelsea making top 4 this season? And from a player perspective, what do you think is the way Chelsea is playing football under Sarri? Is it a good way? Would you as a player enjoy playing under Sarri's system, or what kind of alterations would you make?
I'm quite sure they will make the top 4. That was I'm pretty confident in that. Yes, a couple of other teams are doing quite well at the moment, but obviously watching Sarri ball at the beginning, then developing, then it was a bit tough during the season, and finding a different approach to, okay, how can we do that? you always need the players as well, and the players need to adapt to different speed of football. In Italy, it was quite easy to play that Sarri ball. In England, it's always for the manager a different. I wouldn't say experience, but different way of working. And it was also a development for Maurizio Sarri to work, and he will make a massive step after that year forward, and he will adapt his football as well, which means we won't always see that much Sarri ball in terms of the way its images from Italy. As a player, yes, I would like to play under Mauro Sarri, because it's attractive football. You play with the ball, you don't play against the ball. Yeah, you have you want to play straight away in terms of in the opponent's half. Yeah, you want to score goals. Yes, and sometimes you have to make sure when you play out from the back, it's got to be safe. It's got to be done nicely, but it's quite intense for players. It's quite in terms of tactics. And when you have to think so much on the pitch, that's when the coach comes in. You have to find that thin line where it just triggers them to put out that 100% performance, or it's just over the top, and the players to say, I don't get it what you want, coach. We just play. Okay. And sometimes during that season it looked like this. But they put in some good performances, especially I think I've done all the commentary on the Europa League as well. How dominant in the Europa League Chelsea is, and you transfer that, of course, to the pitch in the Premier League. I actually enjoy it still, watching the game, and I still enjoy the progress that they do, because there's so much potential within that philosophy of Mauro Sarri that can be very, very successful the next couple of years.
Do you think?
So where do you think maybe it's
Do you think Hazard will be a part of that?
Pardon?
Do you think Eden Hazard will stay a part of that?
Well, it's been going on for years now, so and that's what I mentioned earlier. There's always steps in your career, depending where you are, and you have a clear vision of where you want to go to, and it's normal that players have maybe one or two clubs they want to play for in their lifetime, and you don't always get offers from massive clubs, and if you have that opportunity, I know it will be difficult to hear that as a Chelsea supporter. As a player, I can understand it, and to be fair, I actually wish him the very best if he moves on and goes to another club. He's done brilliantly for the club, and Eden. I said I think he will go. So but again, I will say thank you very much for your services. You've done well for us, and you've been a fantastic player, and I wish you all the best.
Well, says someone who turned down Barcelona for Chelsea FC.
Yeah, exactly.
Good
point. As we come to an end with this podcast, I want to give you the chance to tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find you, maybe on Instagram, Twitter, wherever you want.
Yeah, obviously Instagram and Twitter. I'm the Sebastian Kneißl. You can find me there, and I try to put out some content for supporters as well, to understand the game a bit more. Yeah, I work with professionals now on how they can influence their careers by themselves, on how to structure your work, and that actually helps everyone really. So if you're interested in that, go on Instagram, go on Twitter. More Instagram is the content. Twitter is more how can I say, showing that I'm working for the Zone. So we can watch the games and then actually discuss some of the games. I like to discuss the games itself, and yeah, follow me there.
Yeah, actually, you should really do that if you are a listener, viewer of us. Thanks very much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure having you on. So many interesting stories. Actually, the anecdotes have been brilliant. JT mocking about the training ground, telling you to give you a right sort out when you were not main players, and that was really funny to hear that. Yeah, so as for our viewers, you can find everything Sebastian said in the description below. So his Instagram, his Twitter, our Instagram and our Twitter as well, both personal and the attacking too. You can listen to us every other week. We will be podcasting also next week, and we will be at the Europa League game where we will be making a vlog, be about in Prague with the camera, and hopefully enjoying a Chelsea win. And may our Europa League campaign last till the final. We really hope for that. We are delighted to end this episode. So until the next week, keep the blue flag flying high.